냐제 쳔보도 닝미장 돈은 뭐는 쳔보 냐게다 나그라다는 산도 셔마도 tumbato jejanla ki shomsar nechen ror zer ni jangam sa jawur tu ji shan yala man jime banzo jala soran gon ge to ban por shinji lo gon ge to ban por shinji lo gon ge to ban por shinji lo.
Profound and subtle Dharma is rarely encountered in eons. Now we hear and follow it. May we realize the Tathagata's meaning. To liberate beings, please generate bodhicitta before teaching.
Now let's study the Shurangama Sutra. Regarding the Shurangama Sutra, I took a look. My version is the Tibetan edition, which has approximately 176 pages. How much have we covered so far? We've covered over 40 pages, about 42 pages, so that means it's less than 1/4, maybe a little over 1/5, not quite 1/4 yet. When did we first begin teaching this? September 2nd, 2019. I remember we started around that time. It's almost been 3 years now, but we haven't even finished 1/4 yet. This is mainly because we encountered various circumstances that caused some delays, so in the future, who knows when we'll finish? I'm not sure. Originally, I wanted to proceed a bit faster and teach the Shurangama Sutra more quickly, hoping to complete it this year, but it seems like the content in this Shurangama Sutra, while it appears simple, the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, earth, water, fire, wind, and so forth, these are things we encounter in our daily lives. But when we need to analyze them, they're not so easy to understand. Let's see how we continue with our analysis. I'll see how it goes. So now, what have we covered previously? We've covered the 5 aggregates, 6 sense bases, 12 sense fields, and 18 elements. All of these have been completed. Now we're beginning to teach the 7 elements. The 7 elements should be earth, water, fire, wind, space, and then we add consciousness, the consciousness element, and the element of knowing. So next we'll mainly teach the principles of the 7 elements. How shall we begin teaching this today? It should start here. Ananda addressed the Buddha saying, now Ananda begins to speak up. After finishing the 18 elements, Ananda addressed the Buddha saying, World-honored one, the Tathagata constantly speaks of harmonious causes and conditions, and all the various transformations in the world all arise from the harmonious combination of the 4 elements. Now Ananda, we always said he remained silent before, today he starts to speak up. What does he say? World-honored one, the Tathagata, in various occasions constantly teaches that everything depends on harmonious causes and conditions, the harmonious causes and conditions of earth, water, fire, wind, space, and so forth, all the various transformations in the world through harmonious causes and conditions, and all the various transformations of the outer and inner worlds. What are they? They all arise from the harmonious combination of the 4 elements. They appear and arise from the harmonious combination of the 4 elements. The Buddha indeed taught in many sutras that everything in our world that arises from harmonious causes and conditions, all the transformations and manifestations of everything in the world, are all produced by these causes and conditions of earth, water, fire, and wind. Everyone should understand this point. Whether it's the external mountains, rivers, and earth, houses, and dwellings, or the internal eyes, ears, nose, tongue, or our own body, all of these are inseparable from the harmonious combination of the 4 elements. If the 4 elements were absent, neither our outer environment nor the world of sentient beings would be obtainable. So the Buddha often taught that all phenomena arise from harmonious causes and conditions. Everyone should understand this clearly, but if this is the case, why does the Tathagata reject both causes and conditions and naturalness? I now do not understand what this means. He says, originally, the Buddha in many occasions taught that everything arises from harmonious causes and conditions. But why has the Tathagata recently continuously said that both causes and conditions and naturalness? Didn't we say before, when discussing each of the 6 sense bases, 12 sense fields, and 18 elements, we said neither causes and conditions nor naturalness? We kept saying this. So Tathagata, why have you recently been saying that both causes and conditions and naturalness should both be rejected and abandoned? For each one, whether eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, or form, sounds, smells, tastes, tangibles, you said all these phenomena are not produced by causes and conditions and not produced by naturalness. So I now do not understand what this means. I don't know, I truly don't understand now the meaning and intention behind this teaching. Why is it that you usually teach that everything arises from causes and conditions, but now say it's neither causes and conditions nor naturalness? Doesn't this seem contradictory? I humbly pray for your compassionate guidance to reveal to us, sentient beings, the middle way teaching of ultimate meaning, free from all conceptual elaborations. Venerable Ananda humbly prays for your compassionate consideration and mercy toward us sentient beings. Please teach us. Please reveal to us sentient beings. Reveal what? Reveal the middle way of emptiness and wisdom, and the most ultimate and definitive teachings in the Buddha's thought, the teaching free from all conceptual elaborations. Can you transmit this to us? So, although Ananda studied the Shravakayana, he uses terms from Mahayana Buddhism like middle way, ultimate meaning, and free from elaborations quite skillfully. So it seems now Ananda can also ask questions about Mahayana Buddhism. At this time, the world-honored one told Ananda, at this moment Shakyamuni Buddha wanted to tell Ananda, saying thus, previously you became weary of the Shravakayana and Pratyeka Buddhayana, these lesser vehicle teachings, and aroused the aspiration to earnestly seek supreme enlightenment. Therefore, I now reveal to you the teaching of ultimate truth. Then the Buddha told Ananda, previously you actually became weary of the Shravakayana and Pratyeka Buddhayana, lesser vehicle teachings. Previously he studied the lesser vehicle. Everyone knows he was a Shravakayana practitioner, but recently, for some unknown reason, you don't seem as interested in the lesser vehicle teachings, so you renounced or became weary of the Shravakayana and Pratyeka Buddhayana, lesser vehicle paths, and instead toward the Mahayana teachings, you aroused the aspiration to seek supreme enlightenment. You generated Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, so therefore I now reveal to you the ultimate teaching. You have now truly become a vessel for the Mahayana, so I can teach you the ultimate truth. Here, ultimate truth sometimes refers to the ultimate truth, but here it mainly refers to the definitive principles of Mahayana Buddhism. I will teach this directly to you. So the Buddha gave permission and prepared to teach profound teachings to Ananda. Why do you still entangle yourself with worldly conceptual elaborations and imaginary causes and conditions? But from your way of asking questions and your attitude toward receiving teachings, why do you now still entangle yourself with these worldly conceptual elaborations and these worldly delusions and causes and conditions, binding yourself like a silkworm in its cocoon? Why is this? Because you have already abandoned self-centered thinking and have already generated, at that time, Ananda should have generated supreme bodhicitta. When he taught the Shurangama Sutra, Ananda had already generated Mahayana bodhicitta, but although you have generated Mahayana bodhicitta, you still have worldly various conceptual elaborations, various delusions and teachings about causes and conditions, because for him, he's very attached to causes and conditions. Previously, he was always stuck in the horns of causes and conditions and couldn't get out. It was always like this. So why are you still now? Because from the way you ask questions, although he entered the Mahayana, he keeps thinking about how causes and conditions really work, how truly existing phenomena work. He keeps thinking, using these views to continuously bind yourself. For this reason, the Buddha also said, although you are learned, you are like someone who talks about medicine. When real medicine is presented, you cannot distinguish it. The Tathagata says this is truly pitiable. He said, actually, you have this situation. Although you are foremost in learning, you should be widely learned and knowledgeable which is remarkable. There's nothing to question about that. But this kind of extensive learning may not necessarily be especially beneficial. Let me give you an analogy. There's someone who claims to be very skilled with medicine. He talks about all kinds of medicines from east, south, west, and north, medicinal substances, prescriptions, therapeutic effects, and so forth. He speaks eloquently and continuously, but when real medicine is actually presented before him, he cannot distinguish it. He can only talk. When you actually put these medicines, all kinds of medicines, in a big pile before you and ask you to identify them, he can only talk. Actually, he has never distinguished them. This kind of person we call an empty talker in the world. When talking, they sound particularly good, but when it comes to actually doing something, they're not practical people. So this should be extensive learning and study. Actually, many of us might also indeed have this kind of problem, especially those who spend their whole lives as Khenpos, or instructors. Many of them, when teaching, sound particularly wonderful, but when it comes to actually dealing with their own afflictions or practicing, when it comes to how to practice, they themselves have never actually meditated or dealt with afflictions. They just talk eloquently at the oral level. In that case, it's not really meaningful. This is often called armchair strategizing. There was once a person from the state of Zhao who from childhood could speak particularly well. Then when the state of Qin fought against them, the Qin state deliberately used divisive tactics, saying, if he leads the army, we would be very afraid. As a result, the people of Zhao thought he must be very capable. He speaks well, so he might fight well too. Then when he came to lead the army, as a result, all over 400,000 soldiers died at that time. Finally, they were devoured by other states. So what we call armchair strategizing in the worldly sense, in Buddhism we call parroting, or being an empty talker. Actually, Ananda also has this kind of problem. When asked to speak, he speaks very well, but when it comes to some ultimate emptiness-related profound topics, sometimes he can't handle them. For example, when we have study sessions, there are Dharma friends like this too. Some people have quite good wisdom, but when the topic gets a bit profound, they start to wake up. Some speak about relatively simple things, especially about eating and drinking in daily life. Then they can really speak well. What to eat, what kinds of vegetables there are, when I ate something delicious, shopping and buying things. When talking about those topics, they're particularly lively. Then when you talk a little about emptiness, talk a little about the difficult parts in the Shurangama Sutra, they seem to stop talking. At this time, they don't speak. Ananda also has this kind of problem, or he has this inadequacy. In that case, this kind of person, the Tathagata says, is truly a pitiable object, truly compassionate. Generally, the Tathagata feels that even if someone is widely learned but actually doesn't practice at all and knows nothing about profound meanings, this kind of person, the Tathagata certainly considers to be quite pitiable. Among those of us who study while extensively learning and studying, we should also not abandon diligent practice. This includes reciting mantras and actually applying the meanings we've learned in contemplation. This is true study, contemplation, and meditation. This is extremely important. Here the Buddha also criticized Ananda. The Buddha often criticized Ananda, but Ananda doesn't hold grudges. You criticize my extensive learning. You use this analogy for me, saying I'm so pitiable. Well, I won't pay attention to you anymore. I'm leaving. He didn't think this way or say this, but later the Buddha still said, now listen carefully. I shall distinguish and explain for you, and also enable future practitioners of the Mahayana to understand true reality. Ananda remained silent and respectfully received the Buddha's instruction. Here, the Buddha said, now listen earnestly and carefully. Although you are a pitiable one who is merely extensively learned but lacks actual practice and real understanding ability, some of us might be fine with just listening, but our understanding ability Actually, in the process of learning, some people understand very deeply. We can see this during examinations too. Some people, although they don't say much, basically summarize everything well from beginning to end. Some people keep talking and talking, but actually some of the content they even speak incorrectly or understand wrongly. This kind of phenomenon also exists. So the Buddha also said, "You are quite pitiable, but still listen carefully now. I will distinguish and explain these Mahayana definitive teachings free from elaborations to you separately. One is for you and another is for future practitioners of the Mahayana so they can understand the true nature of all phenomena." I want to teach both Ananda here present for his sake so he can awaken quickly, and also for us 2500 years later. Actually, among the future Mahayana practitioners mentioned here, we should be included. So this is also taught for future sentient beings. At that time, Ananda remained silent. Ananda just stopped talking, remaining silent. Then he respectfully received the Buddha's instruction. The Tibetan version says he respectfully listened and received, but actually he accepted the Tathagata's teaching, the Tathagata's instruction, meaning he would follow the teaching. Whenever I say too much, I always get criticized. Some people here also say, whenever I say too much, I get criticized. Better not to speak, better not to act, better not to volunteer. Some of us often have this kind of understanding. Oh, every time I volunteer, working so hard like this, but I end up being criticized by the Khenpo, I might as well not do anything. Look, those who don't do anything are all very comfortable. Some also think like this, but regarding the Buddha's words, indeed, at that time he criticized Ananda slightly. We can see this too. But Ananda still very seriously accepted the Buddha's teaching. He listened very carefully. Actually, when receiving teachings, listening carefully like this is very important. The Mahaprajna Paramita Shastra also says the listener should gaze intently as if drinking from thirst, with one mind entering into the words and meanings, joyfully hearing the Dharma with sadness and happiness. When listening to the Dharma, one should gaze properly at the teacher's face, and when receiving the teaching, it should be like drinking nectar when hungry and thirsty. Single-mindedly, the mind should focus entirely on the meanings taught by the teacher, and one should listen to the Dharma with joy. When teaching, some parts might make one sad, some parts might bring joy. The mind should listen with mixed emotions of sadness and joy. Such a person is a proper vessel, and we should teach such people. This is slightly different from a verse in the words of my perfect teacher, slightly different, but what's taught in the Mahaprajna Paramita Shastra is also very good. When we listen to the Dharma, one aspect is to gaze properly, not necessarily hiding in the back. Some people intentionally always insist on hiding in this place, which is also, and some people have no cherishing attitude and just listen vaguely, eating while doing other things. This is also unreasonable. We should single-mindedly focus our hearts on the Dharma meanings. Sometimes indeed, following the teacher's Dharma voice, we might generate joy or generate suffering, various mental states. This is very necessary because the teachings are like this. Your mind must be moved. There must be a special changing mental attitude. This is quite important. Then below, Ananda continued listening like this. The Buddha told Ananda, "As you have said, the four elements harmoniously combine to manifest the various transformations in the world." Here it says, just as Ananda said before, all conditioned phenomena depend on the harmonious combination of the four elements to arise. What you said before about the harmonious combination of the four elements manifesting the entire outer environment and world of sentient beings in their various transformations, but actually all of these have no true nature. Ananda, you probably still don't understand this. The Lankavatara Sutra also states, what foolish beings distinguish as solid, wet, warm, and moving phenomena are merely conventional names without reality, and also without characteristics, or that which has characteristics. This means that we worldly foolish beings distinguish and categorize as earth, water, fire, and wind. These four, earth, water, fire, and wind, we distinguish distinguish and grasp them as solid, wet, warm, or moving phenomena. Actually, these are all conventional names without true existence. And there are also no characteristics in that which possesses characteristics, or dharma characteristics, and name characteristics. Here, the Buddha should first give an overall teaching about the four elements. A general explanation of the entire four elements. What exactly are the four elements? What is the harmonious combination of the four elements? Below will begin refuting the earth element. Here he gives an overall explanation of the entire four elements. He says the four elements will manifest various phenomena. Ananda, if the nature of those great elements is not harmonious, then they cannot combine and mix with the other great elements, just as space does not combine with forms. Below, he makes a simple analysis using the harmonious combination of the four elements. What kind of simple analysis? One is that if the four elements don't harmonize, it won't work. If they harmonize, it also won't work. Actually, speaking from the true nature. As for harmonious combination, the harmonious combination of the four elements, that is, the four elements of earth, water, fire, and wind mentioned here, do they harmonize or not harmonize? When truly examined through reasoning, neither harmony nor lack of harmony can be established. But without examination, harmony might seem to be established, but non-harmony also cannot be established. This should be the meaning. He says, if the nature of those great elements, if the nature of those four great elements of earth, water, fire, and wind is not harmonious, if this kind of harmony of the four elements is actually non-harmonious, not harmonious, then they cannot combine with the other great elements. So if they don't harmonize, then these earth, water, fire, and wind cannot possibly mix together. It's impossible for them to combine together. So this is because they don't combine. If they don't combine, then earth, water, fire, and wind cannot mix together. Why can't they mix together? Just as space does not combine with forms. Space is an unobstructed phenomenon. Form is an obstructed phenomenon. These two are completely impossible to harmonize. By the same reasoning, if the four elements don't harmonize, then the phenomena within this, that is to say, or any phenomenon among our four elements, if they don't harmonize with each other, then the four elements also don't harmonize. This non-harmony is just like space and form cannot harmonize. This is the meaning of being unable to harmonize. Then, if they harmonize, examining the second aspect, if they harmonize, they are the same as transformation. Beginning and end mutually condition each other. Birth and death continue in succession. If you say the four elements of earth, water, fire, and wind harmonize, then harmony is equivalent to impermanent transformation. In that case, the beginning and end will complement each other, and birth and death will also continue successively. This is also the case. Any conditioned phenomenon, when unexamined, we say it harmonizes. If it harmonizes, it definitely has a beginning and an end. And there's also the succession of birth and cessation. Since there's the succession of birth and cessation, then birth, death, death, birth, 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 death, death. Like a spinning wheel of fire, there's no rest. In that case, these phenomena in conventional reality, definitely each phenomenon is both born and dying and being born. In that case, birth, birth, death, 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 birth, birth. It's always like this. In that case, it's like a spinning wheel of fire in our hands. With a spinning wheel of fire, there's no interruption, no rest. During the process of spinning, some sparks within it decide to rest there and don't want to move. This situation definitely doesn't exist. So the Buddha told Ananda, like water becoming ice, ice again becoming water. This kind of cause and condition of the harmonious combination of the four elements is like our water becoming ice when winter conditions arrive, and then ice again becoming water when spring and summer arrive. It melts again. So conditioned phenomena, the reason for the harmonious combination of our four elements, this phenomenon, for example, after spring comes summer, after summer comes autumn, after autumn comes winter. Then our life, because of the harmonious combination of the four elements, having these conditioned phenomena, then birth, birth, death, 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 birth, birth, all exist. But actually these are also not established. As stated in the Maharatna Kutta Sutra, all phenomena arise through the harmony of various conditions, because all phenomena depend on conditioned phenomena and arise through harmony. Because various conditions harmonize, there is no inherent nature. This is still very important. All phenomena are conditioned. If there are conditions, then these manifesting phenomena, actually their appearance, should have a certain relationship with conditions. But as long as they are conditioned, then there is no inherent nature. This is very important. Why do we discuss the four elements here? When discussing the four elements, actually, when we taught the Abhidharmakosa, everyone knows that any phenomenon has elements of the four great elements. If there were no elements of the four great elements, the four elements mentioned in the Abhidharmakosa don't mean that fire is always burning. It's not like that. Fire actually it should have a kind of hardness, gathering or dispersing or moving quality. Each phenomenon contains this kind of power, this kind of function. This is the harmonious combination of the four elements. Generally speaking, fire's nature is heat, water's nature is wetness, but like our teacup or computer, is there obvious heat in them or obvious wetness? Obviously there isn't, but actually they have the nature of elements, just as we explained before. The element nature of fire, the element nature of water, the element nature of earth, the element nature of earth, and the element nature of space. These element natures should exist. The Abhidharmakosa teaches that each particle in our ordinary world is composed of 8 particles. 8 types of particles. So this is mentioned here. Above this, he hasn't refuted it, just given an overall explanation. Because below we're going to discuss the 7 great elements, the 4 great elements among the 7. He gave a simple, comprehensive description. The 4 great elements are actually like this. In the worldly realm, they are born and cease, or cease and are born. All appearances are also like this. Actually, our body is also born and ceases continuously. It appears to continue without obvious change, but actually it's also born and ceases continuously, constantly changing. The places where we live and any great outer environment are also born and cease, or cease and are born. Such a process. This has an inseparable connection with conditioned phenomena. Below, he will analyze in detail among the 4 great elements. First, he'll discuss the earth element, earth, water, fire, wind, then earth, water, fire, wind, space, the 5 great elements as just mentioned. Each of these must be analyzed. Actually, this kind of analysis should be very familiar to everyone. It doesn't discuss how airplanes are made or how cannons are manufactured or submarines or other nuclear weapons. These aren't discussed much. These might be the work of scientists or military strategists. They handle these matters. But earth, water, fire, and wind, we can't be separated from them in our daily lives. Such phenomena we feel are things we should usually be very familiar with. If others ask you, do you know earth, water, fire, and wind? Yes, earth, water, fire, and wind. Our earth is earth, fire is fire, wind is wind. But actually, when we truly examine with wisdom, we might still not understand earth. Why? The Buddha told Ananda, observe the nature of earth. Coarse forms are the great earth. Fine forms are particles, down to neighboring void particles. Analyze these extremely fine particles to the borders of form, composed of 7 parts. Here he discusses. The Buddha told Ananda, first, among earth, water, fire, and wind, examine the earth element. Regarding the earth element, as the name suggests, everyone knows that coarse forms are called the great earth. Above is the sky, below is the great earth. This we know. Fine forms are called particles. Within the great earth is an earth particle. Very small, these are called particles. Then, how do we subdivide these particles further? Just like our worldly molecules, atoms, atomic nuclei, quarks, etc. Dividing like this. Finally, they're called neighboring void particles. Neighboring void. In our Tibetan, we call them extremely fine particles. The smallest, finest, about to approach emptiness. Indivisible. Sometimes we can call them partless particles. We can also say partless particles or extremely fine particles. Extremely fine particles. You can no longer divide them. No way to divide them further. The smallest, smallest. When we studied logic and when we studied the 400 stanzas on the middle way, particles should still be quite advanced for everyone. I think studying particles should be manageable. The Buddha said, you determine this great earth gradually, gradually. For example, any object in the great earth, let's say a bowl, then cut this bowl into several pieces, then crush it further like this. Finally, it becomes a particle. Then cut this particle further, cut it further, grind it or do this. Then finally, what you can no longer analyze, very, very small, here he calls neighboring void particles, what we often call extremely fine particles or partless particles, the smallest. So this, analyze those extremely fine particles. If neighboring void particles are further analyzed into the finest, finally the borders of form, finally form has reached its borders, no way to divide further. So this, composed of 7 parts, in our world it is composed of 7 smallest particles. Then this, we know that 7 extremely fine particles make 1 particle. According to the Abhidharmakosa and Gateway to Knowledge, both contain this. Previously in the verses of Gateway to Knowledge, there was also this, meaning that 7 of the most extremely fine particles are called 1 particle. 7 particles finally become 1 iron particle. 7 iron particles are 1 water particle. There are also rabbit hair particles, sheep hair particles, cow hair particles, then sunlight particles, sun particles, and also night particles. Nits are lice on the body that haven't yet become lice. Those white things are called nits. Then lice, then grain of barley, like this, 7 by 7, finally becoming our finger joints. These are progressively increasing smallest unit processes. So we say the finest finally becoming particles. Just now, 7 extremely fine particles become 1 particle. 7 particles become 1 iron particle. 7 iron particles become 1 water particle. Like this, 1 by 1 upward, increasing 7-fold. In that case, the meaning is if we divide like this, actually the finest are the neighboring void particles mentioned earlier. Further analyzing neighboring void particles results in true emptiness. If we further examine neighboring void particles, just like the analysis in the Madhyamaka using 6 directions, there can be methods of examining particles, or in the 400 stanzas on the middle way, there are also methods of examining particles, etc. When examining like this, finally these finest particles become unobtainable, becoming like space. All forms, you can examine them like this and finally completely determine them as emptiness. The Mahayana Ganavyuha Sutra also says, analyzing all forms down to observing extremely fine particles, their inherent nature is non-existent, like rabbit horns. If we analyze any form, finally analyzing it by cutting piece by piece, pushing, grinding, finally becoming the extremely fine particles mentioned earlier, then further examining the extremely fine particles, finally this phenomenon becomes unobtainable. It's like, from the perspective of emptiness, no different from turtle fur and rabbit horns. Actually, when determining emptiness, we very much need this approach. In the process of our Dzogchen practice, we also very much need it. Actually, this reasoning is not only for us Buddhists. Even now in quantum mechanics, for example, Einstein's former teacher Planck, he won the Nobel Prize in physics in 1918. He also said that through observation, any phenomenon in the world ultimately becomes unobtainable. In the process of observation, both self and others are shocked. If you're not amazed, it shows you haven't mastered the principles of quantum mechanics. He also said this. So even worldly people, when they examine from the perspective of quantum mechanics, when determining, there isn't a single external phenomenon that isn't empty. Examining through scientific methods, actually the fundamental basis of all phenomena is unobtainable. This principle is still very important. So from the perspective of the earth element, when analyzing like this, finally our Actually, His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche's some Dzogchen practices also require this examination. When examining outer objects from large particles all the way to small particles, continually examining, finally obtaining nothing at all, including when our teacher previously taught Manjushri's great perfection, he also mentioned this. Everyone probably remembers. This discusses determining emptiness. So how is this determined? Now below, the Buddha again told Ananda, if these neighboring void particles are analyzed into space, you should know that space gives birth to forms. Then the Buddha told Ananda, actually through these great phenomena, gradually determining them as neighboring void particles, then neighboring void particles finally becoming space. After this, actually from within space emerge all the phenomena of everything. The Madhyamakavatara states that although all phenomena are empty, within emptiness everything can manifest. You don't need to worry that because it's empty, nothing can arise from emptiness. In Han region, they often say something from nothing. Actually, something from nothing is a very good principle. All our phenomena are something from nothing because their nature is all emptiness. Within emptiness, anything can arise. If it weren't empty, then no phenomena could arise, could not abide, could not be destroyed. Only emptiness has the opportunity for the growth and abiding of all things and final transformation. All have this opportunity. So at that time he told Ananda, you should understand that if all phenomena are empty, you don't need to worry, because he was, after all, a Hinayana practitioner. He might worry about determining all phenomena as empty. So the realist schools, generally speaking, after they finally become emptiness, there must be partless particles. If there were no partless particles, then when establishing great things, there would be no foundation, something from nothing, which would be unreasonable. So their smallest units, partless moments in time and partless particles in matter, must be acknowledged. Generally from the Yogacara school downward, they all have to acknowledge this, but when actually examined with Mahayana reasoning, this is superfluous. There's no need to worry at all. Then the Buddha said, you now ask about how, through harmony, arise the various transformations in the world. Didn't you, Ananda, just ask before? Actually, he asked quite sharply. He keeps remembering, so sometimes Ananda is still, because he's foremost in learning, he's still impressive. The questions he asked, the Buddha never forgot, showing that he asked quite penetratingly. Didn't you, Ananda, say that everything arises from conditions appearing in the world as the outer environment and world of sentient beings in their various transformations? In that case, examine whether this harmony actually exists or not. Because Ananda always believed that the Buddha often spoke of harmonious causes and conditions in the Hinayana, we also often understand this. Phenomena arise from conditions, phenomena cease from conditions. This harmony is very important, but the Buddha below is saying, don't keep thinking there's some harmonious thing. What exactly do you mean by harmony? Now observe this one neighboring void particle. How many spaces harmonize to create it? In that case, I ask you, when we examine like this now, finally there's a smallest unit, a neighboring void particle, this extremely fine particle that's about to approach emptiness. So this particle, if phenomena are to be established, how many spaces harmonize with it to create existence? I ask you, you say it's the smallest extremely fine particle. So I ask you, if it's to harmonize, it should harmonize with other phenomena. If it harmonizes with other phenomena, if it's to be established within emptiness, how many spaces together harmonize to create existence? It's inappropriate for neighboring void particles to combine with neighboring void particles. But actually you cannot acknowledge that your neighboring void particles harmonize with other neighboring void particles. Neighboring void means particles, neighboring void particles. Then it combines with another neighboring void particle, just like in the world. A man and woman coming together to form a family. You have this neighboring void particle, then another partless particle. The two harmonize together. Actually, this harmony doesn't work. Some other ancient commentaries say, Since you are partless particles, another partless particle cannot possibly harmonize. If they harmonize, then they wouldn't be partless. They should have parts. If two are to harmonize, this side harmonizes while that side doesn't. Or you can examine whether two harmonize by completely merging into one, or if there's still separation in between. When examining this kind of harmony, actually your so-called harmony, does your neighboring void particle harmonize with space, or does it harmonize with another neighboring void particle? If neighboring void particles harmonize, that's also unreasonable, because you are, after all, partless particles. How can you still harmonize with neighboring void particles? Because neighboring void particles are about to become space. How could these two be like two beggars getting married? Where is such a phenomenon? Moreover, if neighboring void particles are analyzed into space, if we further examine neighboring void particles, actually neighboring void particles finally all gradually become like space, unobtainable. In that case, how many forms combine to create space? In that case, how many forms, as these neighboring void particles gradually become space, how do this space and forms harmonize? Forms have characteristics, whether large or small, they have form, and space is so vast. How do these two harmonize? For example, in space I find a very, very small form. How does this very small form harmonize with space? This principle, Ananda also has no way to explain it. If forms harmonize, they harmonize with forms, not space. If space harmonizes, it harmonizes with space, not forms. If you think that just now this form harmonizes with any phenomenon, if forms harmonize with any phenomenon, then it's harmony with forms, earth element, or anything that harmonizes with it. If there's harmony, it shows it's not emptiness. But such phenomena definitely don't exist. We generally say form is emptiness, emptiness is form. So if there's a harmonious true existence, then it cannot be empty. If space harmonizes, if the forms or neighboring void particles just mentioned harmonize with space, if space harmonizes, then it's definitely not form. We mentioned before, if you see sunlight, darkness won't exist. If you see darkness, you'll never see sunlight. By the same logic, if your neighboring void particles harmonize with forms, because they harmonize with forms, space will never be possible in that. If you say neighboring void particles harmonize with space, then space and neighboring void particles combine together, and forms will never be possible. Forms can still be analyzed. How can space harmonize? These forms we can still examine. In that case, what exactly does space harmonize with? Harmony is impossible. So this analysis should show that Ananda always thought there was some harmonious thing. He wouldn't let go, using conditioned harmony. But now if someone asks, everything we have is conditioned, we often say because of conditions, because of conditioned harmony. But conditioned harmony, this is Ananda's way of speaking. The Buddha doesn't acknowledge this. Does this harmony harmonize with space or with forms? If conditioned harmony, do cause and condition harmonize together or one harmony? If cause and condition harmonize, is it contact harmony or non-contact harmony? Dependent harmony or non-dependent harmony? Simultaneous harmony or non-simultaneous harmony? Characterized harmony or non-characterized harmony? Actually, we have many such Madhyamaka reasonings from before. When examining with these, indeed in conventional reality, in false appearances, we can establish arising through conditioned harmony. All of this can be said. But the true nature of real harmony, before Madhyamaka wisdom, is fundamentally unobtainable. Many of us also often say this arises through conditioned harmony. In unexamined situations, you can say this illusorily, like a dream, because this is false. Within the false, you can say this, but within the true, conditioned harmony is fundamentally unobtainable. So whether we study the Shurangama Sutra or study emptiness and wisdom, everyone should feel in their hearts that we're now like we're dreaming. Actually, the truly existing things we usually grasp at, we don't say it's because the Buddha said so and we have faith. It's not like this. When examining with wisdom, it turns out indeed that the harmony we usually speak of when examined with correct reasoning, harmony is still unobtainable. Conditioned harmony, the conditioned harmony we often speak of, because of conditioned harmony, each phenomenon must be determined. When determining each phenomenon, the great elements within each phenomenon, that is the earth element alone, what does it harmonize with? Does it harmonize with space, with fire, with wind? When we examine the four elements below, indeed, although we daily exist in this world of four elements, depending on this body of four elements, and the things we do are all related to the four elements daily, but all of these are illusory things. Sometimes we might, when examining like this, ask, why do we have such intense dreams? We clearly know we're dreaming. These things cannot be established, yet in such deluded dreams we can't wake up. Why is this? We might have this kind of realization. As long as everyone examines, you fundamentally don't understand that within the Tathagata Garbha, the nature of form is true emptiness. The nature of emptiness is true form, pure and natural, pervading the Dharma realm. The Buddha told Ananda, actually you have studied Mahayana Buddhism relatively little. For this reason, you fundamentally don't understand that within the Tathagata Garbha, anything is possible. The nature of form is actually empty, like an illusion. All forms are truly empty in their essence, not falsely empty, not temporarily empty, not a similar emptiness, but truly empty by nature. Actually, it's illusory. Appearances don't cease. So pure and natural, pervading the Dharma realm. Everything within the Tathagata Garbha is pure and natural. In our Tibetan, we translate this as natural luminosity, pure and natural. Actually, here we can also say that everything within the Tathagata Garbha is pure and natural, pervading the Dharma realm. For any phenomenon, there isn't one that isn't pervaded by the emptiness of true nature, empty in essence, luminous by nature, with compassion pervading everywhere. In some tantric teachings, there's also compassion pervading everywhere, such terminology. Following sentient beings' minds according to their capacity for knowledge, manifesting according to their karma. Actually, each sentient being, according to their own wisdom's depth and shallowness, some awaken through this, some become confused through this. So according to sentient beings' different capacities, actually their objects of knowledge, pure and impure phenomena, are also different. Some see impure appearances, some see pure ones. According to their capacity for knowledge, their phenomena are different. This is actually manifesting according to their karma. Sentient beings themselves, since beginningless time, have created different good and bad karma, and presently experience these appearances of suffering and happiness. The world, being ignorant, mistakes this for cause, conditions, and natural existence. Because in the world, actually, many are, for example, some ordinary people don't understand, so they're confused. The reason for confusion is they think arising from conditions exists. Some non-Buddhists, because they're also ignorant and confused, for this reason believe in a permanent autonomous self, believing in natural existence. Many ignorant people in the world, because their degree of confusion differs, some think it arises from conditions, some think it arises naturally. All of this is the discriminating consciousness calculating. No matter what was mentioned above, you, Ananda, are also like this. Although you, Ananda, aren't as inferior as the non-Buddhists, you still always think, if non-Buddhists were to ask, they would say arising naturally and so forth. Ananda always believes arising from conditions exists. We Buddhists also, many people might think arising from conditions should exist. There are also some materialist non-Buddhists who think everything has no arising whatsoever or arises without cause. No matter what, all these ignorant and confused people in the world, some think it arises from conditions, some think it arises naturally. Actually, all of this is us sentient beings not recognizing the nature of our true nature, our discriminating mind speculation, our discriminating mind measuring and conceptually imputing, calculating like this. Whatever has verbal expression has no true meaning. As long as there's verbal expression, actually there's no truly real meaning, because when expressed through language, it's not truly real. To describe describe it as anything is to miss the mark. Zen also often teaches, as soon as you speak, actually it's not the truly real meaning. As the Kusala Mula Samgraha also says, the world disputes with me, I don't dispute with the world. What the world acknowledges, I also acknowledge. Actually, language is pallid. What it expresses actually isn't the true nature. The Avatamsaka Sutra also has a line, worldly linguistic conventions are sentient beings' false discriminations. Knowing the world is all non-arising is truly seeing the world. Worldly linguistic conventions are actually established through sentient beings' false discriminations. Knowing that the world is all non-arising is truly seeing the world. But how many people can truly see the world's reality? Very, very few. So if our ordinary worldly language expresses something, actually it's a conventional phenomenon, not the true reality free from the four extremes and eight elaborations. So as soon as you open your mouth, you'll be wrong. Zen often has this saying too. In that case, what is the true reality? The true reality, the reality of all phenomena, is the inconceivable non-duality of luminosity and emptiness, like a mute person tasting the sweetness of sugar, self-aware and self-knowing beyond expression. This kind of state is actually the true reality of all phenomena and also the original face of one's own mind. On this point, the sutras have many teachings. The Tantras have many teachings, especially Zen and our Dzogchen directly and straightforwardly point this out to you. After this, some have immediate realization, some have awakening. So when you truly awaken, the reality of this world is indeed extremely rare and precious. Let's stop here.
Kirgana jirano chupai chupun tsulen dwa sha
bandran gara badna sadarda bandran gara badna sadarda bandran gara badna sadarda